So, are you experiencing a case of deja vu? I am, especially with this episode. Now, I apologize for the poor lighting, the poor audio, the poor everything. This is the D. Louise book series, and what you see is what you get. So it's nice to meet you. I'm Christina, Kristina. This is where we read books and talk about books. I'm a series person. I like series. I like series progression. Star Trek Next Generation is a series. We can binge watch the series and have character progression from episode to episode. We do the recaps every single Friday. And I also hope that you will check out If Then, that appears later this afternoon. If you like this author, then maybe you like that author. We started out with the Bridgertons. If you like Julia Quinn's Bridgertons, maybe you like Joanna Lindsay's Mallory's and Stephanie Lawrence Sinsters. There are over 30 books in the Sinster series, and I'm telling you the truth, it's a much better series than Julia Quinn's. Stephanie Lawrence, the characters proceed through the entire 30 books. Main characters become backup characters, sub characters become front characters, and it's a massively highly excellent written series. She's got several different four-booking arches, and all the books take place at the exact same time. So to be able to coordinate all four books so that if this is happening here with this character, then this character is interacting with this character in the next book. It's amazing how she did all those. So check this, and also Flashback Monday, where we talk about Romantic Times Book Review, and I recommend a gazillion different books: mystery, sci-fi, romance, super suspense, paranormal, erotica, harlequin, contemporary romance, the whole nine yards. And so, like I said, we are doing Deja Vu today. We've done this before, and we are doing it again. We are doing it again and again and again and again. And we did it before, and we're going to do it later, and we're going to do it before. But because this is a time loop episode where the characters experience the groundhog effect, and we have done this before. Let's catch up here. This is season 5 and disc 5, and what we did 217 last week, The Outcast. I didn't particularly care for that, but please check that out. My review of that. I had some issues. There's no reason that someone should be penalized for their beliefs or whatever is going on with them. And today is Cause and Effect, and next week the First Duty, and the week after Cost of Living. So I hope you will check out for those. But like I said, we've done this before. We've done it now. We haven't done it here on this podcast before, although we have done it a couple times. Not this exact way, but in season 2, in Times Squared, Captain Picard met his future self, and that was a little bit of a time loop. And in this season, A Matter of Time, a historian, a guy claimed to be from the future when he was actually from the past. Also, yesterday's Enterprise had a little bit of a time loop in it too. And time and again in season 1, the crew investigates a time rift on a planet. And also, season 1, episode 24, Dr. Mannheim's experiments cause the time distribution to always have Paris. And we haven't experienced them yet, but we've still got time travel in All Good Things in season 6 that we'll talk about in future weeks. Time's Arrow, which is coming up soon, and Tapestry, which is also in season 6. So we've got a couple of different things, and also I feel the one closest to this episode is Clues. season 4, episode 188, where they encountered the aliens, but they couldn't be allowed to live because the aliens didn't want anybody to know who they were. So Data was the only one not affected by the aliens thing, and it was up to Data to get the crew past this thing. And then they all suspected Data was a traitor, and they investigated him and all this kind of stuff. And that it just bothered the heck out of me that they did that. But that's another one of those time episodes where they've lost time. So anyway, we're gonna repeat things several times in this episode. But here we go. We've got. I wish we could play this episode live and discuss it as we go on, but because of all the legal issues, we cannot do that. I am just an itsy bitsy crumb on the ground channel, and you know, some of the bigger ones might be able to do some stuff like this, but not me. So let's get started with cause and effect. I've been having trouble with my remote lately. I need to find new batteries. Cause and effect. And we will get the captain's voiceover several times during the episode. The exact same voiceover several times during the episode. We start the episode with they're on the bridge and they're in the middle of a crisis. I couldn't find a shot. There wasn't a shot of the whole bridge area. So Riker is saying damage report. Crusher saying casualty reports coming in from all over the ship. Data says the starboard nacelle has sustained a direct impact. We are venting plasma. LaForge says initiating emergency cord shutdown. Rose says inertial dampening's failing. We're losing attitude control. Riker says this is a bridge. All hands to emergency escape pods. Data says core shutdown is unsuccessful. We are losing antimatter containment. LaForge says we've got to eject the core. Data says ejection systems are offline. Core breach is imminent. Picard says all hands abandon ship. And he's sitting in his chair and he's telling everybody to abandon ship, and the thing explodes and it goes kaboom. And then we get opening credits. When we return after opening credits, we are having a poker game. Riker says, sometimes I wonder if he's stacking the deck. Data says, I assure you, Commander, the cards are sufficiently randomized. Worf says, I hope so. Data deals 8, ace, queen. Dealer gets a 4. Worf says, no bet. Data says 10, 7, no help here. A pair of ladies for the doctor. The dealer receives a 9. And Beverly just sits there. And Data says, Doctor, may I remind you, since you show the highest hand, you control the bet. Thank you, Data. I bet 10. Worf. Data says Jack, 4, deuce, and 6. Crusher says she bids 20. Riker says, raise your 20, and your 50 more. Worf says 50. Crusher says, I'm in. Data says, I will see the bet. 7, a possible straight for Commander Riker. Jack, still no help for the Klingon. 8, 9 for the dealer. Crusher says 20. Data says too rich for my blood. And I know that's a poker saying. Data doesn't have any blood, or supposedly not. So Riker says you're 20, and he raises her 100. Worf folds. Crusher puts in 200. Riker says you're 2 and 300 more. Worf says he does not have a straight. Crusher says we'll soon dive out, won't we? Let's see your cards. Take it. How'd you know I was bluffing? Crusher says I had a feeling. Riker says I guess it's better to be lucky than good. Crusher says it's the way your left eyebrow raises when you're bluffing. Just kidding, Commander. And then Owaga from sickbay pages Dr. Crusher. that Commander LaForge needs her in sickbay. So then we're in sickbay. Jordy says, "At first I thought the catwalk was spinning. As it turns out, it was me. Luckily, Ensign Fletcher was there to grab me. It's a long way down to the bottom of the warp core. Crusher says you have all the symptoms of an inner ear infection. That would explain the dizziness and the headaches, but there's no physical evidence. My guess is you've been working too hard." Jordy says, "I've been putting a lot of extra hours on this Typhoon Expanse project." Beverly says, "I'll give you 20 cc's of Vertazine. That should clear up the dizziness. But finding time to relax is up to you." Jordy says, "What? What is it?" "Jordy, have you had these symptoms before?" "No." "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm positive. Why?" "It's funny. I feel like we've discussed this before, and I remember giving you a hypo spray for dizziness. I've never had these symptoms before today, so you must be thinking about another patient." Beverly says, "No, I'm sure it was you. Well, I tried to get some rest and try and stay away from high places for a few days, just in case. Thanks, Doc." And he leaves, and they say goodnight to each other. Okay, so then the next scene is in Beverly's quarters, and she's trimming the plant, and then she goes to bed, and she puts her book down and her glass down, and she lays down. She starts hearing some voices. She gets up to turn on the lights. She breaks the glass. Okay, in the next scene, Jordy is saying, "As you can see, the Typhoon Expanse is huge. If we want to chart the most remote star system, we'll have to launch a probe within the next few hours." Riker says, "Fine. What about the luminosity studies?" Jordy says, "That may pose a problem." Picard says, "How so?" "The flux spectrometers are still down for realignment." "I thought they were supposed to be back online yesterday," Riker says. "They were until the Stellar Dynamics Lab decided they needed to install new modules." Data says, "I'd like to recommend we use a graviton polometer. It will perform a similar function." Picard says, "Make it so." Um, Dr. Crusher says, "Captain, I have something I'd like to report." Picard says, "Yes, Doctor. I heard voices in my room last night. I was alone, so at first I thought I was imagining things. But this morning 10 other people reported hearing them at the same time I did." Troy said, "What were the voices saying?" Beverly says, "I couldn't make them out." Riker says, "Data, did the sensors pick up anything usual last night?" Data says, "No anomalies readings were reported." Riker says, "When we're through here, we'll recheck the sensor logs." Data says, "Aye, sir." Picard says, "Counselor?" Troy says, "I heard nothing unusual last night." Geordi says, "Maybe it's a problem with the comm system." Worf contacts the room. He's bridged to Captain Picard. Picard says, "Go ahead." Worf says, "We're getting unusual readings 20,000 kilometers off the starboard bow." And Picard says, "On way." Why does Jonathan Frakes swing his leg over and stand like that all the time? Why does he do that? Why doesn't he just stand behind the chair? Why does he swing his leg up like that? I'd just like to know. So, Picard says, "Report." Rose says, "Sensors didn't detect the phenomena until we were almost on top of it, sir." Worf says, "A highly localized distortion of the space-time continuum." Hint, 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 hint. Space-time continuum. Where have you heard those phrases before? And there's that thingy. This whole thing, he sits in his chair. He doesn't move. Um, So Picard says, "Back us off, ensign, nice and slow." Rose says, "Aye, sir." "Captain, maneuvering thrusters are not responding." Data says, "The distortion field is fluctuating." Geordi says, "All main systems just went down. Power levels are dropping rapidly." Riker says, "Red alert." Data says, "There's an energy buildup on the distortion field." Troy says, "We have to get out of here now." Data says, "Captain, something is emerging. It's a smaller ship." Riker says, "Shields up, evasive maneuvers." Worf says, "Shields inoperative." Rose says the helm is not responding. Data says the vessel is on a collision course. Impact in 36 seconds. Picard says hail them. Worf says no response. Picard says suggestions. Riker says decompress main shuttle bay. The explosive reaction may kick us out of the way. Data says, Captain, I suggest we use the tractor beam to alter the other ship's trajectory. Picard says, make it so. Worf says, engaging tractor beam. And the NCC 1841 clips the ship as they go by. Riker says, damage report. Crusher says, casualty reports coming in from all over the ship. Data says, starboard nacelle sustained an impact, direct impact. Venting drive plaza. Geordi says, initiating emergency course shutdown. Rose says, inertial damping fields failing. We're losing attitude control. Riker says, this is bridge. All hands to emergency escape pods. Data says, course shutdown was unsuccessful. We are losing antimatter containment. Geordi says, we've got to eject the engine core. Data says, ejection systems are offline. Breach is imminent. And Picard, still sitting in his seat, says, all hands abandon ship. Repeat, all hands abandon, and the ship blows up. So the ship blows up, and we start all over again with the same. We didn't get the overview the first time, but we're getting the overview the second time. Captain's log, Stardate 45652.1. The Enterprise has entered an area known as the Typhoon Expanse. We are the first Starfleet vessel to chart this unexplored region. That you know of at this time. You may be surprised who else got here first. And this stuff with Geordi being treated by the doctor, there has been so many instances in this time loop thing of Beverly treating somebody for an injury over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I could have sworn that it was Geordi again and again and again, but in the previous loop, it was Worf over and over again. So I was wrong. But anyways. Okay, so then we're back to the card game again. Riker says, sometimes I wonder if he's stacking the deck. Data says, I assure you, Commander, the cards have been sufficiently randomized. Worf says, I hope so. Data says, 8, ace, queen, the dealer receives a 4. Worf says, no bet. Data says, 10, 7, no help there. A pair of ladies for the doctor. Dealer receives a 9. Doctor, may I remind you, since you show the highest hand, you control the next bet. Worf says, is there something wrong, Doctor? Crusher's like, no, I bet 10. Data says, Jack 4, deuce 6. Crusher says 20. Riker says, you're 20 and I'll raise you 50. All right. Keep waiting for them to show the whole table. They're not showing the whole table. They go back and forth between Worf and Riker and her. But Riker stops. He goes, you're 20 and I'll raise you 50. And then he looks at her and says, you're going to call my bluff, aren't you? I think I'll quit while I'm ahead. Beverly says, how did you know I was going to call you a bluff? Riker says, I just had a feeling. Crusher says, me too. And then Awaga calls her to sickbay for Geordi again. So then Geordi is repeating the same story that he said the first time. That he thought the catwalk was spinning. As it turns out, it was him. He's lucky Ensign Fletcher was there to grab him for the third time. It's a long way down to the bottom of the warp core. Beverly says, you've had all these symptoms of inner ear infection. That would explain your headaches, the dizziness, but there's no physical. Geordi says, what is it? Geordi, have you ever had these symptoms before? Geordi says, now that you mention it, I think I have. Do you recall when? No, I don't. We've had this discussion before, and I know I've given you this exam. Let's check the medical logs. You've been treated several times with dizziness related to the visor, but I read no mention of dizziness. Geordi says, must be deja vu. Both of us at the same time on the same thing? Interesting. So then we go back to Beverly's quarters again, where she's trimming the plant again, and she's having deja vu again. And she goes to bed, puts the book down, turns out the lights, puts the glass over, hears the voices again, breaks the glass again. Then she calls Dr. Picard and goes to see him. So she puts her day clothes back on and goes to Picard's office, or yeah, ready room or whatever. And Picard gives her steamed milk with nutmeg. I do not like my milk hot. I do not like it hot. You want some hot chocolate? That's fine, but milk hot? No, 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 no. Icky, 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 icky. Milk with strawberry quick syrup in it, milk and cookies, but not hot milk. No, 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 hot milk. Um, because whenever I get insomnia, I try to perfect the recipe. Beverly says it's the eeriest thing when the glass broke. It triggered the sensation even more intensely that I'd done it all before. Because as you knew earlier, I was reading this book and I had the distinct feeling I'd read certain paragraphs before, but I assumed I'd read the book years ago and I'd forgotten. Beverly says, I've had this feeling for hours, and then the voices. Well, it could be nothing more than a result of sleepless nights, but let's be sure. Have Data and Geordi run a ship-wide diagnostic, concentrating on the time and place you heard the voices, and we'll discuss the results tomorrow at 700 hours. Thank you for everything. Picard says, thank Aunt Adele. Okay, so they don't show the whole room, they just keep scanning the individual faces. So Picard says report. I mean, no, well, I'm on the wrong spot. Data says the internal scans were negative. There was no evidence of auditory anomalies anywhere on the ship. Geordi says, as far as the sensors are concerned, nothing unusual happened last night. Beverly says 10 other people reported hearing voices at the same time I did. Worf says, bridge to Captain Picard. Picard says, go ahead. Worf says, we're getting unusual readings 20,000 kilometers off the starboard. On my way. So what's with the like? I just thought I'd show it from a different point of view. They walk in, the guy sitting in a data seat gets up, leaves, and okay. And then he does the leg thing. I don't know. I just thought I'd ask. So then let's show the two of them. We already showed the captain sitting in his seat. He's sitting next to Troy. Picard says, report. Rose says, sensors didn't detect the phenomenon until we were almost on top of it. Worf says it's highly localized distortion of the space-time continuum. Riker says, on screen, they see that blue thing again. Back off ends in nice and slow. Aye, sir. Captain, maneuvering thrusters are not responding. Data says the distortion field is fluctuating. Geordi says all systems are down. Power levels are dropping. Riker says red alert. Data says there's an energy field building up in the distortion field. Troy says we have to get out of here now. Data says, Captain, something is emerging. Riker says shields up, evasive maneuvers. Worf says shields are inoperative. Rose says helm is not responding. Data says the vessel is on a collision course, impact in 36 seconds. Picard says hail them. Worf says no response. Picard says suggestions. Riker says decompress main shuttle bay. The explosion may blow us out of the way. Data says, may I suggest we use the tractor beam to alter the ship's trajectory? Make it so. Worf, engaging tractor beam. Riker says damage report. Crusher says casualty reports coming in from all over. Data says the starboard nacelle was hit. LaForge says emergency core is down. They need to get rid of the core. The thing won't work. The whole thing goes through. We're losing this and this. Everything happens all over again. All hands abandon ship. And the ship explodes again. Guess it was a way of letting us know that the loop was going to start repeating again. Was when they started with the captain's voiceover one more time. Captain's log start a 45652.1. The Enterprise is into this area space and as the Typhoon expands. We are the first Starfleet to do this vessel, blah, blah, blah. And then we go to the quarters and we're playing cards again. And this is where we get a little different. All right, a good view of everybody. Riker says, sometimes I wonder if he's stacking the deck. Data says, are you sure you, Commander, the cards are sufficiently randomized? Worf says, I hope so. And Worf stops talking. Riker says there's something wrong. He says, I'm experiencing Nipu, the feeling I've done this before. Riker says, yeah, last Tuesday night. Worf says, that's not what I mean. Crusher says, I'm having the same feeling again. Keep dealing, Data. 8 ace, a queen. You're going to give me a queen. You're going to get a 4. Deal, Data. No one has bet. Forget the bet. Just deal. 10, 7, queen, 9, jack, 4, Worf says. Riker says, deuce, 6. This is highly improbable. How did we know? What Crusher? Wait. Crusher to sickbay. She contacts sickbay and asks if Geordi's there. She says no, and then she goes, oh, wait a minute. He just walked in. So this time we get to sickbay, and it's Beverly, Geordi, and Picard. Picard says, "You wanted to see me, Doctor." She says, "Yes." Have you get the feeling that you've experienced certain things before? A sense of repetition? Yes, recently while I was reading. Why do you ask? She says, "There have been a number of similar incidents reported all over the ship. Feelings of deja vu. I had a premonition Geordi was going to come into sickbay. A few seconds later he did, with the symptoms of an ear infection. I was going to run the standard test, but somehow I had feeling they would turn out negative. So I ran an optical diagnostic which traced the problem to Geordi's advisor. His dizziness is being caused by a phase shift in his visual receptors. It's causing him to see images that aren't there. Geordi says they're like blurry after images. I ran a scan to see if I could detect what he was seeing. I picked up some minuscule distortions in the surrounding Daikian field. Somehow his visor is translating those distortions into visual impulses. Geordi says it could be a malfunction in the ship's warp field generator. I'll check it out. Picard says run a localized subspace scan to look for anything else. I start. Geordi leaves. Picard says keep me advised. And then she goes back to her quarters again. She's got the book. She's going to trim the flowers again and then decides not to. And she has deja vu about the drinking the wine. So then she gets back in bed and then she picks up her tricorder and records the voices that she hears. And apparently she's just not hearing them like in her mind or anything, but they're actually being broadcast on the ship, and her tricorder is able to record the voices. So she records the voices, and she takes it down to Geordi and Data. So then she goes down to Geordi and Data, and Geordi says, it looks like you've managed to record 6.2 seconds worth. Let's see if we can filter the signal and clear it up a little bit. Beverly says, then I wasn't just hearing things. Data says, the sound itself appears to be real. However, the acoustic energy does not correspond to any ship systems nor to any voice communication sent at the time you heard it. Beverly says, then where did the sound come from? Geordi says, the voices, you heard the voices at the same time our localized subspace scan picked up a Dekian field distortion. The two may be related. Let's give another listen. Data says, computer perform a narrow bandwidth analysis, eliminate all non-vocal waveform components. Beverly says, can we isolate the voices, find out what they're saying? Computer, continuous playback, please. There are approximately 1,000 voices overlapping. The voices are those of the Enterprise crew, our voices. So this time, Beverly has called the meeting. I'm sorry to call you here so early, but we couldn't wait until 0700 hours. We think we may have had an explanation for the odd occurrences around here. Commander, Geordi says this is going to sound pretty wild. Somehow we've entered what seems to be a temporal casualty loop. We think we're stuck in a particular fragment in time, and we've been repeating the same fragment over and over again. Troy says, is this what's causing our deja vu? Yes, but more than that, Beverly says, it's deja vu. You only think you're repeating events. We actually are. Geordi says, our theory is this. Every time the loop begins again, everything resets and starts all over. We don't remember anything that happened before, so each time through the loop, we think it's the first. Riker says, you mean we could have come into this room, sat at this table, and had this conversation a dozen times already? A dozen, 100, it's impossible to tell. We could have been trapped here for hours, days, maybe years, Jordy says. Beverly says if what we're saying is true, those voices I heard might have been echoes from previous lips. Jordy says it's the same thing with the phase shift in my visor after images in time. If you're right about this, Picard says, how did it happen? How did we get here? Geordi says, Data says I have an hypothesis that may explain that, Captain. I have analyzed the recording the doctor made. Most of it is quite ordinary. 150 discussions about ship operations, 250 conversations of a personal nature, 5 couples engaged in romantic encounters. Your point, Mr. Data, Picard says. There is evidence of some sort of disaster aboard the Enterprise, severe enough that the captain ordered all hands to abandon ship. I have isolated 3 segments of the recording that are crucial. Worf says a highly vocalized distortion of the space-time continuum. Collision course impacts in 36 seconds. Picard says all hands abandon ship. Repeat, all hands abandon. Worf refers to a distortion. If this were a temporal distortion, if we were close enough to it, it's possible that the large enough explosion might have ruptured the space-time continuum. We collided, exploded, and then got stuck in repeating this loop of time. Picard said, if you're right, we could escape the loop by avoiding the collision. Voight says, that's our guess. Worf says, maybe we should reverse course. Riker says, for all we know, reversing course may be what leads us into the crash. Picard says, no, we can't afford to start second-guessing ourselves. We'll stay on this course until we have reason to change it, but we'll do everything we can to avoid the collision. Geordi says, Captain, we might not be able to figure out how to avoid this accident until it's too late. If the loop begins again, we'll forget everything we learned this time around. Picard says, what do you suggest? Geordi says, if we do find a way to avoid the collision, we should try to send the information into the next loop. Is that possible? We have seen the echoes after images from previous loops appear as distortions in the Dacian field. We may be able to send a deliberate echo into the bottle loop. Troy says, like a message in a bottle. Exactly. We could enhance the Dacian mission to create a specific pattern and send ourselves a message, Geordi says. Not long one, probably only a few characters, maybe one word. Riker says, how do we know we'll pick up that word the next time through? Data says, if the Dacian mission is modulated correctly, it will set up renaissances in my positronic subprocessor. I will receive the information on what we call a subconscious level. Geordi says, now there's the catch. We have no way of knowing how this information will be received by Data. It might be a post-hypnotic suggestion. Picard said, even with these uncertainties, we've got to try. Take whatever steps are necessary to send a message to Smith. Geordi is making adjustments to Data's head. So let's go take a look at that. So then they're working on Data's head. It's possible we've tried this 1,000 times and it never worked, Geordi says. Do you have a feeling that you've done this before? Beverly asks. No, I don't, Geordi says. Neither do I. Maybe that's a good sign. Geordi says, let's test the emitter. Data says particle accelerators are full power. The Forge's Dacian field active, particle flux nominal. We're in business. All we know is a message. Senior officers report to a bridge. The red alert sounds. Crusher says, on my way. Riker says, we've got to figure out how we handled this before. Picard says, back us off, ensign, nice and slow. Rose says, aye, sir. Captain, maneuvering thrusters are not responding. Data says, the distortion field is fluctuating. Geordi says, all main systems just went down. Power levels are dropping rapidly. Data says, there is an energy buildup in the distortion field. We have to get out of here now. Data says, Captain, something's emerging. Shields up, evasive maneuvers. Shields inoperative, the helm's not responding. The vessel's on a collision course, impact in 36 seconds. Hail them, Picard says. Picard says, suggesting decompress main shuttle bay. The explosion may blow us out of the way, Riker says. Captain Data says, I recommend we use the tractor beam to alter the other ship's trajectory. Make it so, Mr. Worf, engaging tractor beam. Riker says, damage report. Casualty reports are coming in from all over the ship. Data says, stubborn nacelle sustained a direct impact. We are venting drive plasma. LaForge says, initiating emergency core shutdown. Rose says, dampening failing. We're losing control. Riker says, this is the bridge. All hands to emergency escape pods. Data says, core is shut down. We're losing antimatter. And then the core thing and all the other stuff happens. And wait a second. I want to see if I can find it. At a couple of seconds before the impact, Data programs the message into his thing. Now the thing is, after they've all been set, they'll see if the thing is still there. So again, we do the captain's voiceover view. Captain's log state 8456.5.2 when the Enterprises entered an area of space known as the Typhoon Expanse, we are the first Starfleet vessel to chart this unexplored region. You think so? Ouch. Now we get a picture of the whole room. Riker says, sometimes I wonder if he's stacking the deck. Data says, I assure you, Commander, the cards are sufficiently randomized. Worf says, I hope so. Riker said, something wrong, Mr. Worf? Worf says, I'm experiencing Nipu, the feeling I've done this before. Riker says, yeah, last Tuesday. Worf says, that's not what I mean. Crusher says, I've been having the same feeling. Wait, an 8, an ace, a queen, and a 4. Deal the cards, Data. Data deals everyone all 3s. Data says 3, all 3s. Crusher says, I was positive I knew what the cards were going to be dealt. Worf said, I was also sure. Finish dealing the hand. Riker gets all 8s, Worf gets all kings, Crusher all 10s, and Data all 6s. Look at this, we've all got 3 of a kind. First we get 3, and then 3 of a kind. And then the doctor contacts sickbay, and the sickbay contacts her this time, and Geordi is there. So then we're back in sickbay, and Geordi is telling the same story he told before. At first I thought the catwalk was spinning. As it turns out, it was me. I'm lucky Ensign Fletcher caught me. Crusher says, you've had all the symptoms of an ear infection. That would explain the dizziness, the headaches, but I don't see any physical. Fletcher says, what? Geordi, have you ever had these symptoms before? Now that you mention it, I think you have. Do you recall when? Geordi says, no. Crusher says, I know we've had this discussion before, and I remember giving you an examination. Let's check the medical logs. You've been treated several times for headaches related to your visor. There's no mention of dizziness. Geordi says, must be deja vu. For both of us, Beverly says, about the same thing. I'd like to run an optical diagnostic. For an ear infection, Geordi says. Crusher says, I have a hunch. Hold still. And then she does the examination. And then she goes and talks to Picard. So then she's talking to Picard. His dizziness is being caused by a phase shift in his visual spicers. It's causing him to see things that aren't there. The flashes, they're like blurry after images. I ran a scan to see if I could detect what he was picking up. I picked up minuscule distortions in the surrounding decaying field. His visor seems to be translating those distortions into visual impulses. The forge said, could be a malfunction in the ship's warp field. I'll check it out. Picard says, while you're at it, run a localized subspace scan to look for anything unusual. Geordi says, aye, sir. And Picard says, keep me advised, Doctor. Company. Like company? You like company? Company doesn't want to be here. Company does not want to be here. No. I want to go play. I want to go lay in the sun where it's warm. I'm upset. Mommy's not on the couch. I can't sit in Mommy's lap in this chair. This is not good. So anyways, we're back in engineering. And Geordi says, lateral sensors online, some space scanners active. Data says, would you run a level 2 diagnostic on the warp subsystems? Data says, certainly. Geordi says, all 3s, that can't be right. Data says, I have encountered the numeral 3 and an inordinate of times over the last 2 hours. We have a Daikion field fluctuation on deck 9, section 28. Beverly says, Crusher to Commander LaForge. Jody says, LaForge here. I just heard what sounded like voices in my room, but there's no one there. Jody says, Sensors just picked up something strange too. We're checking it out. I'm on my way. And then we hear the glass break. And Jody says, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. So then we're back in the observation lounge. Data says, I've isolated 3 segments of this recording that are crucial. And then we hear Worf say, a highly localized distortion of the space-time continuum. Data says, collision course impact in 30 seconds. Picard says, all hands abandon ship, all hands abandon ship. Jody says, Worf refers to distortion. If this was a temporal distortion, and if we were close enough to it, it's possible that a large enough explosion might have ruptured the space-time continuum. We collided, exploded, then get stuck in this time-repeating loop. Picard says, if you're right about this, then perhaps we can escape this loop by avoiding the collision. Jody says, that's our guess. Worf says, we should reverse course. Riker says, for all we know, reversing course might be what leads us into the crash. Picard says, we can't afford to start second-guessing ourselves. We should stay on this course until we have reason to change it. But in the meantime, I think we should do what we can to avoid a collision course. Jody says, Captain, we've been seeing the number 3 all over the ship, on consoles, in a poker game. Data says, to date, we've encountered 2,085 conspicuous examples of the number 3. LaForge says, all of those 3s can't be coming up by accident. Crusher says, maybe something's trying to tell us someone. LaForge says, we came to the same conclusion, so we ran a shipwide diagnostic. The only thing unusual was we found a Dickion modulation in Data's positronic sub-processors. Riker says, what could it be causing it? LaForge says, I don't know, but if I wanted to send a message from a time loop to the next, I might use a method like the Dakion emission. Troy says, you think we send ourselves a message? Jody says, it would make sense. Maybe you are trying to tell ourselves something. Picard says, if that was true, what could 3 indicate? Riker says, maybe we should run a level 3 diagnostic on all systems. Jody says, it's a good idea. I'll have the computer run out a pattern of algorithm based on the 3. And then Ro contacts the captain and says, we're getting unusual headings 20,000 kilometers off the starboard. And Picard says, on our way. Okay, so then everybody heads back to the bridge. Picard says, report. Ro says, sensors didn't detect the phenomenon until we were almost on top of it, Captain. Worf says it's a highly localized distortion of the space-time continuum. Riker says, on screen, how do you think we handled this before? Picard says, back us off, ensign, nice and slow. Rose says, Captain, maneuvering thrusters are not responding. Data says, the distortion field is fluctuating. Jody says, all main systems just went down. Power levels are dropping rapidly. Data says, there's an emergent energy field buildup in the distortion field. Troy says, we have to get out of here now. Data says, Captain, if something is wrong. And then a ship is coming out of the space. Riker says, shields up, evasive maneuvers. Worf says, shields inoperative. Rose says, helm's not responding. Data says, the vessel's on a collision course, impact in 36 seconds. Picard says, hail them. Worf says, no response. Picard says, suggestions. And you know how calm Picard stays through all this, never leaves the seat or nothing? He's just too calm about the whole thing. Hail them, no response. Picard says, suggestions. Riker says, compressed main shuttle bay. The explosive reaction may kick us out of the way. Data says, may I suggest the tractor beam to alter the ship's trajectory? Make it so. Worf, engaging tractor beam. Data looks at Riker's 3 pips. The tractor beam will not be successful. I am decompressing the main shuttle bay. Enterprise slides forward, and there's no jump in time again, and they stay in the same thing, and we've successfully avoided the collision. Data says, Picard says, what happened? At the last moment, I speculated that the 3s might refer to the rank insignia on Commander Riker's uniform. That indicated to me that his suggestion might be the correct course of action. Geordi says, Data, you must have picked up a message we sent from the last loop and stacked the deck in the poker game without realizing it. That is possible. I may have also inadvertently responsible for the unexplained appearance of the number 3. Picard says, Mr. Worf, end red alert and try to access a Federation time-based beacon. Let's see if we can find out how long we've been in this casualty loop. Worf says the time base confirms our kilometers off by 17.4 days. Picard says, reset them, Mr. Data. Data says, aye, sir. Captain, we are being held by the other vessel. The computer identifies it as the USS Bozeman, a Federation ship, Soy class. Soy class? They haven't been in service in over 80 years. Picard says, open a channel. Oops. And then we see Kelsey Grammer, full beard, in the old uniforms that Captain Kirk was wearing. This is Captain Morgan Besson of the Federation Starship Bozeman. Can we render assistance? I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. We were just going to ask you the same thing. Captain, your vessel is not familiar to us. Picard says, Captain, have you any idea what just happened? Our sensors detected a temporal distortion. Then your ship appeared. We nearly hit you. Picard says the Enterprise has been caught in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you. You must be mistaken. We left Starbase only 3 weeks ago. Captain, do you know what year this is? Baseman says, of course I do. It's 2278. Picard says, perhaps you should beam aboard our ship. There's something we need to discuss. And like you and everybody else, you're left to assume what happens next, what the discussion is all about, what the interaction is all about, but they just leave you. They leave you to fantasize what happens next on your own. I hate when they do that. They always do that. They just end it and they leave you to fantasize and fulfill in whatever you want. Like, I have this thing. I say, it's just, and I leave it to you to fill in your sentence. It's just good, it's just bad, it's just horrible. You put any word you want in there. It's just frustrating that they leave us hanging like this, but you can say just anything. It's just. That's what I say when I don't know what to say or don't have the word to fill in or want you to fill the word in. It's just. It's just. It's just. It's just. It's just. Sorry, I got stuck. I got stuck in a time loop. So that is the end of the episode. Cause and effect. So we've done the outcast, we've done cause and effect. Next week we'll do the first duty, and the week after the cost of living. And I hope you will also stay for If Then, that shows later this afternoon. And I think that's going to be witches. I'm not exactly sure yet. And don't forget Flashback Monday, the one I did recently. I went overboard and did over 70 books. Over 2 hours and 70 books. 70 books. 70. That took a lot of work. There's so many different authors to choose from. There's so many different genres to choose from. I hope you will check it out. And please hit the like and subscribe. Thank you.